Hello everyone, my name is Shauna Ramsey and I'm a Title Plus consultant with Law Pro. Today we're bringing you the 4th episode of the In Closing podcast, where we'll be discussing topics important to the real estate community. Whether you're a real estate agent, broker, lender, lawyer, home buyer, or investor, we hope to bring you some insightful content. Today's guest is Chris Dolan, and he's a real estate agent with Royal LePage. I've personally worked with Chris on a few transactions and I was very impressed with the outcome. His customer service was fantastic, he's in constant communication and always available to answer any questions. So I'm really excited to speak with Chris today. Let's go and get started. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Shauna.
Welcome to the 4th episode of the In Closing podcast. We're so happy to have you here today.
Excellent. Thank you very much for having me. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about yourself. How did you end up being a real estate agent?
My father was a carpenter, and we used to, build houses and stuff like that. And for me, it was just one of these natural progressions where you're thinking, I'm renovating a house, that kind of stuff right now, or I have built my own house, that kind of thing. And just, I was looking for something different. I'd always kind of worked with my hands. I used to be a technician, that kind of stuff. So I knew Ottawa and the surrounding areas fairly well. And I've always liked the investment side of it. I think for people, your number one way of building wealth and stuff like that is to have investment type real estate, which is kind of the ultimate goal for me.
So yeah, building houses, you would have had some experience with all kinds of different issues like septic and the framing and the roof. And
yeah, generally when I walk into a house, I have a good feeling like you're looking for cracks in the drywall and issues with the foundation, because you start there, foundation, go up to the roof, and then you're not, again, you can kind of know with the age of the house, if there's issues that were, at the time, whether it be, aluminum wiring or vermiculite insulation, all this stuff, roofing, that kind of thing, and, water issues or, block foundations versus pour, the usual problems with them. And then things like big capital or septic systems, that kind of thing, where it's there's a good chance there's an issue with it or there isn't, or that kind of stuff. But like anything, you need an inspection done, and I'm not an expert, but at least there's stuff that I would steer people away from.
Well, yeah, because if you've got a little bit of knowledge in the area, you can at least help them before they commit and then pay the money to have an inspector come in.
That's it. And maybe sometimes it's a curse because you're looking at it, versus what they want versus, what you see, that kind of thing. But ultimately, you want them to be satisfied with their purchase after they make a large capital investment.
Well, and it's refreshing, to have somebody representing you that's got your best interests at heart. You're trying to find them something that's going to be a good fit for them, and
you're 100%. Yeah, like a lot of it is when you're looking at these homes, would you buy it? Obviously people's tastes are different and what they like and that kind of stuff, but would you buy that home yourself? I think is a lot of it. And most of the time I'm satisfied myself. That yes, I would, or yes, I see the potential here. Or do you have the skill to do a little bit of work, that kind of stuff on it yourself, versus using contractors, which, as are extremely expensive.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that is, again, with I think that's what I kind of bring to the table, from that perspective. I think my strengths are more in the construction, that kind of stuff. And for me, curb appeal has always been one of the things that I think on resale, that kind of stuff as well. If you're buying a house and it looks good from the street, something that, looks like you want to live in it, or the potential to make it, bring the value up, that kind of stuff, by adding, a little bit more curb appeal. Those are the two strengths, I think. I think my staging talents aren't the greatest, but I would just hire somebody else to come in and do that. So.
But you know what? I think it's great that you also consider resale value, because I think that's something that many buyers might not think of. They're so excited about buying their dream house, they're not necessarily thinking about, will this be valuable to somebody else down the road, or is it, too unique that it's not going to be, in demand when they want to sell it again.
Well, that's it. It's, particularly with, houses in the country, where like if there's some big issue that, you got a lot of landscaping to do, that kind of stuff to bring it up to a certain level or whatever, but just, how much money you're going to spend, keeping the property up, that kind of stuff. And then things like capital expenses, like massive expenses like septic systems, is that something that you're able to, to me it adds value because from the construction or the actual building structure and the integrity, the whole thing, you look at it as a whole block, right? So, but that coupled with the curb appeal and to get your resale, everybody knows a newer septic system is going to take a lot of the worry out of a rural purchase. Same with wells, versus like a dug well, shallow well, versus a drilled well that is treated. Some people draw their water right out of the rivers and they run them through filtration systems, UV light, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, lots of things to consider when you're dealing with country properties.
Exactly. And then, city is the same deal, finding out neighbors, that kind of stuff is always,
Very good point.
Rentals, neighbors, are you near a school, that kind of stuff. What do you, can you put up with a little extra noise? Same with buying a townhome or a semi-detached, that kind of stuff, where how much soundproofing do you have, that kind of thing. And also, for me, neighborhoods, and most realtors will go through a neighborhood and see how the neighbors keep the properties up and stuff like that too. So if you're a new home buyer, your first time home buyer, and you're, maybe can't afford as much, are you going to have a problem later on selling it when you want to upgrade? I think with first time home buyers, for example, these days, the cost of everything, you're almost better. A lot of these people are used to living in apartments. Why don't you go out and look at a duplex or a triplex or something, add a little bit of value into it, live in it for a few years, use the equity in it to buy your forever home if you want at that point, and just hold on to the actual investment property just to build yourself some wealth and that other cash flow at some point, or hopefully in the beginning as well.
So I know that during the pandemic, things really picked up. At one point, got extremely busy.
Yeah.
I don't think it was really the norm in the past for Ottawa and surrounding area to experience these multiple offers the way we did during the pandemic. But what is your take on that? I mean, it seemed crazy.
It was crazy, again, like, maybe in larger urban centers, they're used to dealing with 25 offers or whatever at one time.
Yeah.
And I think, I do a lot more rural properties and stuff like that, which is a little tougher, and not as many people are going to go out and cut the grass for 2 hours, that kind of stuff. But you still, when you're getting 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 offers, and then trying to counter some of them back and stuff like that, it was a bit challenging, but there was such a demand that, I think, from a business standpoint, it was very good. Like your average days on market are, a couple of days versus, I think in September this year, it kind of dropped off the table when the interest rates started going back to a normal 45 days or 60 days or even 180 days. Kind of when I started, they would sit 4 or 5, 6 months.
Did you find that it was stressful on your time? I mean, I can only imagine the communication that takes place when you're getting multiple offers to consistently being relaying this information to your clients, back to the other agent, back to your clients. So much back and forth.
A lot of back and forth. I think when you're in that position, as a buyer's agent, I mean, you're sitting there trying to push your product. As a listing agent, you're sitting there, and a lot of times I find it just as easy to sit in, for example, this boardroom and kind of lay everything out. It depends who your clients are as well, because some of the older folk want to be met in person. Some of the newer people don't care. You can just forward them and go through email and just put them on, our Zoom or a conference call, that kind of stuff, and go through each offer. Usually you boil it down to, purchase price, deposit, closing date, conditions, and stuff like that. I think we got a little spoiled in that a lot of the the conditions would be waived, and which is super tough, especially when you're on the buyer side of it. You're advising that client, hey, you might be on the hook for this. But I think another thing would be, having, if that property didn't appraise out, but generally the appraisals were fairly close to the market value. I don't think there was really a lot of issues on my end seeing that kind of thing. But I think what it did was make realtors kind of focus their clients, like, how badly do you want this, right? And for me, it's always tolerance. Your pain tolerance, right? Like, how much do you want? I think you should put down on a piece of paper what you're comfortable paying, and make sure that you have that difference if the appraisal doesn't come out to what you're actually approved.
So you were having that conversation with your clients, like, hey, listen, if you're going to put an offer on the table here with no conditions because you need to be competitive, you recognize that these are the risks that you're accepting.
Yeah, right? I mean, I think at most, I'm assuming, Royal LePage, for example, there's a form that you just go essentially through it, so that they know, because you can tell people. But like it's not necessarily a problem until something comes up later on.
Wow.
But if you've gone through and explained to them, you realize you're putting an offer, that you're waiving a home inspection, you're waiving a septic inspection, your financing condition or whatever. But ultimately, it's your client's choice to put in any offer they want.
Yeah.
So you put in an offer a lot of times, and you have a fairly good indication, like you've advised them. They're putting in multiple conditions and that kind of stuff. Multiple offers, a lot of times you'd be over, some of them 100, 125, 130,000, so you would I always, put your best foot forward, and you may get a chance to you might get a second chance at a counter, that kind of stuff, or sending an offer, like usually do another full front sheet with a different price amount or that kind of stuff. And as a listing agent, a lot of times, if I had 5 or 6 offers, well then, like, I'm going to ask them, do you want to improve your offer, that kind of stuff. Just it's my job to look after the seller as well. So sometimes you end up with.
So you were being strategic with your clients.
Well, I think you have to be, like, in their best interest, right? Because later on, could we have gotten another $20,000-$25,000? To me, the big thing were the deposits. For example, like someplace like Toronto, they're probably laying down 50, 100, 150, 200,000 or whatever their deposits are.
Right.
Up here, in some of the rural areas, it shocks me, because I'll get deposits for like $1,000 or something like that, and now generally you want to have something that they can't, like, the buyer has to be serious, but as a listing agent, you want to make sure that when it comes to closing, that somebody's not going to walk away from a $10,000 or $15,000.
Yeah, that higher deposit is just a bit more of a commitment, right?
Exactly. They know that they're going to lose something significant if they decide to walk away from it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not fun, this business, from that perspective, and that it could happen.
It could happen. Yeah. It can be. It can be stressful. There can be a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of excitement, but then there can be disappointment. It's really quite the industry.
It's again, you're up at night, stuff like that. All of a sudden, something you didn't think was going to happen happens. So you can generally count on it. But you're usually, after you have a few years under your belt, you take things in stride. And I don't always react, for example, my own right away, because there's so many different factors at play, and so many other professionals involved, that you don't want to say or do something. You just have a sense about it after a while, and that you're going to get some people are going to make things happen, and things that you didn't think were going to come together, and again, try to remain. I don't like to get too confrontational with other agents. My own personal thing. I think that if we kind of work together, and that you're more likely to get a deal done.
Yeah,
which
more
is
likely to
ultimately that's all we're here for, is get a deal done.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
And so that everybody to some degree gets what they want. I don't think things come together as nicely if you purposely try to screw other people. Like, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not. There's something going to come up. It's going to come up. Either it's karmic or whatever. That's always been my experience. So.
Well, like I said, it is a heck of an industry. So speaking of the industry, I'm curious to know. So in 2022, the interest rates started to go up. And I know you mentioned in September that things started to slow down. And to be very honest, because I'm a consultant with Title Plus, we really saw the same thing.
Yeah.
We saw a real slowdown in September and then picking up again in December. But the first 3 quarters of 2022, what did you find that was like? Did you see a gradual slowdown, or did it just sort of carry through and then drop?
I noticed it in July and stuff like that for me personally, like for some of the properties I had, like a lot of times Ottawa's a little different in that, we do have a really good mix of high tech and government, so it's fairly stable. It's like a 45 and has been for 60 years.
Yeah.
You know, so every year, anytime it would regress, just looking at the graph, it would come back gangbusters within a year or 2 years and outdo anything. It's always been a gradual, a really nice, it doesn't go like this, just like that, and has been for. And I look at, some place like Toronto or whatever, like it would be a huge difference, but it was actually a blessing, I think, for us, because we get a lot of Toronto agents up here looking to buy our properties, and so it's fairly steady. It seems it's still a bargain, I think, in Ottawa. Yeah. So there were properties that, generally I would think were probably on the high end, because a lot of times you can present, your comparative market analysis to your clients, and you can go through this, but their neighbor got this amount of money. Right. So you have to kind of go with their price. And surprisingly enough, it was still like, even on these, would be on the high end of the pricing, list pricing that they were selling. And then you started to see it kind of drop. And I have one property in particular that has been sitting for a while. It's a kind of a special type property, but it was listed at a little higher price, and now it's down closer to what I think the market rate probably would be. But it's been up for a while. It's been up the traditional, 5-6 months on the market. So we've gotten back to the point where we are having to do price reductions. It's a bit more of a balanced market than it has been, and but I still think, when I'm looking at some of the Royal LePage forecasts for this year, they're not. A lot of that, what we saw in the decline, basically going back when the interest rates started to go up in March of 2022, it was so gradual, and then it seemed to be a couple right there in August, September, and then it kind of dropped off the table a bit. And there wasn't I didn't notice a lot of it, and then you started to see it kind of, like there was a couple of properties that I listed that would have been gone in a couple of days, and, are still sitting up there 2 or 3 months. Now you're starting to see the price reductions. Yeah. If they turn down an offer, for example, those people are just going to go somewhere else and find it. But the nice thing, I think, of what I was getting at the beginning is that Ottawa doesn't have enough, I think, inventory, and that becomes an issue there, especially new home builds and stuff like that. But we have so much immigration. A lot of people coming up from Toronto, for example, a lot of military, a lot of government. Are transferring, that kind of stuff. Those people still need a place to live. Yeah. But I think prices and the interest rates, they can't afford as much now. So they're sitting back and they're waiting. It's not like they're not going to buy. And that's what I think December's kind of been, that there's been a few. I was fairly busy. People are deciding now they have to buy. So they're coming out. Yeah. And just looking at the numbers, like snapshots, those are in the fall months or whatever, it's down quite a bit. And now to me, it feels like it's starting to be busy again. To the point where they are calling for, at the end of 2023, across the country, the national aggregate home price forecast is only going to be 1% below what it is at the end of this year. December of 2022.
That's where I was going to go next. I was going to ask you, do you have any forecasts for 2023?
Well, 2023 is basically, again, I'm just following what the big guys say here.
Sure.
But, they basically have, that they expect over the first few months of the year that it will flatten going into the middle of the year. And prices expecting to flatten in Q2 and then begin a modest improvement in the second half of the year to the point where at 1%, most of the losses, according to this, in my mind, would have been done this past year, and now it's going to kind of even out a bit as we push to the end of the year. Mm-hmm. Who knows with, if the government keeps printing money and stuff like that, but, I'm looking at it, the average price of a house across Canada in the fourth quarter of 2023 is going to be $765,171 across the entire country. Some of the bigger centers, obviously Montreal, Toronto, I guess Halifax, Ottawa, and Vancouver, and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because the median price of a single-family detached property condominium projected to decrease 2% and then increase 1% to $781, and the average price of a condo across the country is $568,000. Well, you go downtown Ottawa now, and it's pushing out all those condo buildings, like in the streetscapes like Westboro and stuff like that. It's just condo town now. I used to live in that area, and it shocks me driving through there now. The buildings, they're everywhere, and they're the construction level for condominiums, pushing out towards the airport, again, out in places like Barrhaven, the high rise is going up there. I mean, people are choosing condominiums. I benefit a little bit from that because I do some more rural work, and some of those people don't like condominiums when they buy those apartments and then feel they need 1 to 2 acres.
Yeah.
Love thy neighbor, maybe not so much.
Well, kind of feels to me like maybe the market will stabilize in 2023. At least that's what we're all hoping for. I think, we've been through quite the up and down, and who knows. So everybody is just looking for a little bit of, norm.
I think so. I look at, the unemployment rate's still fairly low. And, if you want to buy a house or whatever, at some point, the prices will decrease or whatever, and that might offshoot a bit. It's nice because Phil Soper, who's the president CEO of Royal LePage, basically had, there's things that it's just people were kind of sitting on the sidelines and stuff like that. Yes, the interest rates are higher and stuff like that, but, there's still demand there because of immigration and because of, people have to buy that kind of stuff, and maybe they can't afford a house they could have afforded a couple of years ago, but they can still afford to go out and buy a house. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I have a little condo townhome, it's 900 square feet. It's a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bathroom for sale right now. And it's sometimes, like a lot of times if somebody calls me up and says, I want to see it, you're working with an agent, so I go out and show it to them. And I went out, 3 weeks ago, and this gentleman looked like he could buy himself a very nice house or whatever. And, I'm showing it to him, and I've kind of done my due diligence over the phone, that kind of stuff. You're just not willy-nilly showing people houses. But I found out once I was in the house, he was looking to buy this house, and he has 4 children. I don't know where they would have, maybe they would have been sleeping in, it was a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bathroom. Can you imagine the shower fights in the morning? Anyway.
I can, because I did have young kids. They're not so young anymore, but yes, I do remember those days. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, that was a lot of information, and I have to say, Chris, I've always been very impressed with your services. I have come to you for, purchases and sales of my own. I think that you've always got the client's best interests at heart, and I thank you very much for chatting with us today, giving us all this info. If someone wants to reach out to you, how can they get in touch with you?
I think, again, yeah, all the usual suspects. I obviously maintain social media, that kind of stuff. And my website is chrisdolan.ca, which is just, it's a Royal LePage type website, and it's linked with everything. So, our listings and stuff like that go directly onto that site. But chrisdolan.ca, I'm in Google. You can Google me, that kind of stuff. I think that you develop, if you're in the business long enough, I think a lot of your business comes from referrals and stuff like that. So that's pretty much the bread and butter these days. But I definitely, I think when you're taking on a client or whatever, you do your ultimate to make sure that they're satisfied with their purchase or the sale of their property, and making sure that you've kept them informed in the whole bit through the whole process. And that's just, I think a lot of agents that do this exact same thing as I do. But I really appreciate your business.
Well, I think you're very humble, and you are, one of the best agents I've ever met, to be quite honest. So Chris Dolan at
royallepage.ca is my, and chrisdolan.ca is my website.
chrisdolan.ca. Okay, perfect. Well, thanks again.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, take care.
Thank you.